Well, good morning, folks. Thanks very much for joining us on a Thursday morning in the middle of a challenging period for all of us. Whether you're in Mumbai, as Sanjay is joining us from India, or whether you're just here in the city region with most of the rest of us. My name is Mark Basnett. I'm Managing Director of the Local Enterprise Partnership and also of Growth Platform. Our role basically is both as a local enterprise partnership to inform the city region strategy from the views of the business community, to make sure that we've got very much real world practical insight from business ensures that our policies and strategies for economic development and growth are appropriate for us all. And from a Growth Platform point of view, we set Growth Platform up jointly with the Combined Authority to help basically try and tie in and coordinate the business ecosystem across the city region, working with lots of partners, and I know some of you are with us today. Thank you for joining, from chambers, local authorities and others, to try and make sense of the business ecosystem for our many thousands of businesses, about 50,000 at the last count, that form the business community of our city region. So that's our role. Whilst I'm fronting today, I'm grateful to the team behind me, with Carolyn leading that team on helping put together today's event. So thank you, Carolyn, and the team for that. We've brought together an absolutely stellar lineup of speakers, and I know they're dying to live up to that billing a little bit later. But let me just sort of kind of explain why, and I'll introduce all of them shortly. But listen, we've got a huge challenge on our hands, haven't we? We've all lived through 7-8 months of incredibly challenging economic situations, combined with a massive health challenge too. We know from first-hand experience working with thousands of businesses, both directly and through our partners, just how difficult it's been for business. Many businesses sadly have already been lost to the city region. Many more have eroded funding positions, eroded their cash flow positions, often used up reserves. A hugely challenging situation for many folks. And so unlocking finance for obvious reasons is critical. And we've structured today around kind of a few different aspects of that. The first thing you often think about in terms of finance is getting a loan from the bank or other sources. But we've tried to start, really from sort of brass tacks, working with our first speaker, which is Laura Stuffins from BDO, looking at the things you can do in unlocking finance within the business. So many businesses have resources that they don't necessarily always access in driving their business forward. So Laura is going to talk on that subject for us. And if I can just say, by way of introduction to Laura's been co-directing a program of business resilience for us as Growth Platform for the last 6 months. And if I can read a quote from one of her clients, they said, "This was the best bit of consultancy we've had as a business in over 20 years." So that's a huge tribute to Laura and Mark Sykes and other colleagues at BDO that are doing that great work on business resilience. So looking forward to hearing what you've got to say, Laura, in that space. Laura will then be followed by Philip King, who is the UK's Small Business Commissioner. Hugely grateful to Philip for sparing some time on his national sort of program of getting out to businesses and explaining the roles of the Small Business Commissioner, and particularly looking again internal to the business, what can be done, particularly through supply chains, debtors, and managing finance within the business, and what can be done both by you as a business and what help is available to you. Then we start to look outside of the business, and We'll then hear from Stephen Johnson from Bibby Financial Services. There's probably no greater business that's connected with our city region, rooted here, got a phenomenal history as a company in our city region than the Bibby Group. I'm delighted to partner with Stephen and the Bibby team to talk through a range of financial products and services and approaches, some of which you may in normal trading situations you may have not considered, things like invoice discounting, etc. That's where as a way of potentially unlocking value that you've already created in your business. And then finally, to round off our morning, we'll hear from Mark Borzomato, who's from MSIF. Mark has got many years of experience both within MSIF and in other fund management arrangements, now leading the MSIF team. He will talk about the various funds available through, not just through MSIF, but more widely from that experience base. So we've got lots to get through. We are recording all of today's session. The reason for that is not to record these bits of introduction, but to capture the substance of each of our keynote speakers and to put them on the sort of Let TV YouTube channel that will be available after this event. Probably give us till next week to sort of get those edited and get up online. We're sure to share those with all participants. And we'll put them out wider through our social media and website network so that you can access or forward on to other colleagues where you found them particularly useful. So listen, enough chat from me. Thank you for joining us. We will have an opportunity after Philip's spoken. We're going to have a bit of Q&A. If anyone's got any compelling questions, I would urge you to put them in the chat. So Carolyn or myself can capture those. And if we don't have any, look, that's not a problem. We'll just move on to the next presentations. But if anyone's got a question for any of the speakers, not just the two that we'll have heard, then please put it into the chat. And if we have time, we'll try and answer it. So with no further ado, it's my great pleasure to welcome Laura Stuffins from BDO. Over to you, Laura.
Thanks, Mark. Hi, everybody. I'll just share my screen. Hopefully you can all see those slides. So good morning, everybody. I'm Laura Stuffins, Director at BDO in Liverpool. We are a firm of accountants and business advisors, and as Mark says, we've been working very closely with the growth platform over the last 6 months. So very pleased to be invited to speak today on the subject of unlocking cash in your business. We have all heard, haven't we, the phrase cash is king, and I think now more than ever, businesses' ability to effectively manage their cash flows and how it determines how they can respond in this uncertain environment. So today what I want to do is think a little bit about the cash cycle or the working capital of your business. Remember, this is your working capital. It's interest-free finance. It's the cheapest and fastest source of cash for your company. So today I just want to go through some elements of this and how you can really maximise free cash up in your business. So here at BDO, we work with businesses of all sizes. They all face similar issues and challenges around working capital. But I think one of the mistakes a lot of businesses make is actually not managing all the relevant elements of the cash cycle together. Often cash becomes the job of the finance team. It's all about credit control and cash collection. But actually really thinking about the working capital cycle from beginning to end, so from procurement right through to setting your prices and then receiving your cash in, how you deal with stock in the business, etc. And embedding some good practices across the business can have a real tangible impact on the amount of cash that you're getting through the door and the speediness of that cash. So here are all the elements of the cash cycle that I just want to think about today. Some will be more relevant than others to your business, but I think all of them interlink and should be managed together. So firstly, sales, starting in the top right-hand corner of the diagram. So sales are your window out to the external market, and it goes without saying that any decisions that you make here ultimately affect the cash that you're getting into your business. The contracts you issue to your customers, your invoicing terms, your sales prices, your discounts, your incentives, they will all affect the amount of cash that you're getting in and the timing of that cash. So I guess having a think about, are there any changes you can make there in order to reduce the amount of time that cash is outside of your business? Could you consider billing more in advance? Could you take some more deposits on orders? Could you increase the deposits perhaps you're taking on orders? Or simply just ensure you're getting your invoices out at the earliest opportunity? Perhaps talk to your sales team and see what the possibilities are there. And actually one area we've seen a lot of change in the last few months is the use of discounts and incentives. So I think it's all too quick to slash prices, offer discounts, incentives to get sales over the line and to get cash into the business. But just be really careful about which lines actually are maximising returns. One of our businesses, a retail customer, actually that was one of the first things they did during the lockdown period, was actually properly reviewing all their product lines and the discounts that they were offering there to make sure they were maximising return, they were getting cash into the business, but not at the expense of the profitability. Revenue leakage, this is an interesting one. Are you inadvertently giving things away for free that you could be generating cash on? So it might sound daft, and probably less so if you're selling widgets, but certainly in service industries, are you actually giving some value away to customers there that perhaps you could monetize? And I guess lastly on sales, just please make sure you're not making any decisions here that can really affect the contribution that your sales are making to the overall profitability of your business. They might be bringing cash in, decisions you make might bring cash in the short term, but please do look at the long-term sustainability of some of the decisions that you're making there. Linked to sales then are debtors, and I know there's a couple of the speakers later will be talking a little bit more on debt management and invoice discounting and the like. But I think simple actions here can make a really, really big difference. So do you have the ability to lock accounts so salespeople aren't inadvertently taking orders on problem accounts within the business? That can make a massive difference to just cash and how that's managed. Look at inefficiencies. Are there any areas in the process that are causing delays with you getting invoices out the door? Is there a lot of manual process, for instance? Do you have a high volume of invoices? Are you leaving all your invoicing to the end of the month? That's adding days on to cash that is out of your business and not in your account. There's systems nowadays that can automate a lot of that work, so please do have a think about that, and if you need any help on that, do reach out to me. Dunning, also known as your collection management system, obviously a vital part of credit control, so making sure you have routine processes, setting alerts on reminders on invoice dates, upcoming payments, chasing routinely, and making sure you have an escalation process around that. Moving down the diagram then, supply chain management. So as I said, it's not just about sales, invoices and managing your debtors. Actually, reviewing your supply chain at this time can have a real impact on how cash is moving in and out of the business. It's something that we're seeing with businesses becoming more and more important at the minute. And this isn't just about squeezing the supply chain, taking longer to pay your bills, eking out a few more days credit. Yes, it's a fine balance, in your working capital and when you're making those supplier payments. But what actually we're seeing is supply chains working together in a way that we haven't really seen before to make sure that there is sustainability through all the changes that are going on. There's tough choices to make in your supply chain. It's all about price. It's all about, the discounts and the negotiations that you can come to. But really understanding your supply chain from end to end to see how cash is moving in that supply chain can have, it's just really beneficial. So what do I mean by that? So yes, check all your payment terms, pay on time wherever you can. You don't want to end up with any reputational or credit rating issues. but please just don't make any assumptions around your supply chain in terms of robustness and certainty of supplies. Just because somebody looks cheaper, gives you more credit, doesn't necessarily mean they're sustainable, and that actually can have longer term consequences on you in terms of your cash squeeze. So an example of this I just want to share with you is actually a medical business that we've been talking to who needed to source some small springs for their medical devices. So they found a supplier, they were efficient, they delivered on time, great payment terms. But when actually we looked down the supply chain and we did some work around the robustness of that, what we found is this supplier was actually, their main market was supplying into the car industry. And during COVID, they had diverted supplies and diversified, but that was only a short-term measure. So whilst this medical company had thought they'd found a really good, cheap supplier of these springs, actually it was only a short-term measure, and they've had to redo negotiations elsewhere and sort of find new suppliers. So what looked good on the surface actually didn't end up being good in the longer term, and again that has impacts on your cash and the time that's been taken to negotiate around those supplier deals. What we've seen with supply chain, especially over the sort of the first 3 months of the lockdown period, where businesses were reviewing their supply chains, is that long supply chains, including just in time and offshoring, just weren't working and were very exposed. It became very clear that it was about just in case rather than just in time. And actually businesses were broadening their supply chains and nearshoring a lot of that activity. Obviously, when you're buying goods from further away, that means often paying for goods up front and paying for all your duties up front, which of course is cash out of the business. The goods take longer to get into the country to be turned around and out to customers. So therefore elongating the cash conversion process. So it's worth just thinking about, sometimes nearshore suppliers, their prices are higher. It might be more expensive, but the resilience that gives you and the shorter lead time that actually gives you means that potentially you can convert cash quicker in the business. Expense control is the next area just to touch on, and obviously this is something that businesses are really looking at the moment. And I think, put simply, if your operation expenses aren't driving you profit and cash, you shouldn't be spending that money. So do keep an eye on that, check you've got approval processes in place and your spend is being monitored against your budgets. Review your suppliers, look to negotiate some better deals, especially on your higher volume suppliers, but also review the contracts that you have in place. And actually, some work we've been doing, reviewing contract management down the supply chain, has shown that weaknesses in contract management can actually be accounting for between 5 and 15% of turnover being leaked out of the business. That is cash that is in someone else's pocket and not yours. So just reviewing all your contracts and your supplier processes could have some really tangible benefits. Investment, we've put on here, whilst investment might be, significantly curtailed at the moment, just still, if you are needing to invest, to diversify, to move into kind of a new area as part of your adaptation, then, it goes without saying, just really revisit the return you're getting on that investment, prioritise though, and prioritise what you really need. And if you need to seek finance around that, it's often cheaper to do it at the point of purchase rather than revisiting later on. Inventory, typically a lot of cash gets tied up in stock. So monitoring what you buy as well as what you sell is really important. Promoting really good communication between your teams, your departments, to forecast your demands as much as possible, therefore preventing any unnecessary stockpiling, and you're minimising other costs such as storage, insurance and things like that. Near sourcing, I've mentioned before, can just cut those lead times and speed up cash collection. And the two final areas just to touch on here is around actually your ability to monitor your working capital and to have visibility over that. I think it's clear to say that if you don't have visibility over the movements of your working capital and cash in your business, then you're going to find it really hard to relieve those shortfalls. There are lots of tools out there that can help you with this. And if I just click down briefly, these are some of the examples, and they will give you instant access to cash flow in your business and what actions are you can take to really be driving cash back into the business. And this information should be at your fingertips as much as possible, to make sure all of those areas are just outlined on the right hand side of the diagram. You can really be successful in doing. So do have a think about the information you have in your business that allows you to make those decisions around your working capital. And then lastly, is just around some of the structural areas of your business. So if you have any non-profitable, non-cash generating units, have a think about the leakage that's causing in your business. Are there any functions of your business perhaps you could outsource that are taking you too much time and might be cheaper to do so? And do you have any existing debt that you think really you could relook at, restructure to minimise your repayments and minimise the cash out of the business at this time? I know some of the other speakers will come on to talking about that. Lastly, what I just wanted to share with you, which I think is quite important in terms of cash management over the next few months. There's obviously a lot of change out there in the landscape, and there is cash implications of that it's worth just having on your horizons. So as it stands, at the end of October, the furlough scheme is coming to the end. So the 30th of November is the last day you could submit claims. That's for periods ending on or before the 31st of October. After this date, you won't be able to submit any claims or add to any existing claims. The Sybil scheme is extended until the 30th of November. So that was launched back on the 24th of September. So that's another deadline to be aware of if you're looking to get finance into the business through that mechanism. In December, the restrictions on the commercial landlord's ability to take enforcement actions on commercial tenants who are in arrears, that will come to an end. So again, maybe implications there in terms of cash out in the business. January, of course, we have Brexit. So, there may be more cash up front, slower moving of goods coming into the country, tying up of cash around the ports and your imports to be thinking about. And then March is the repayment date for any deferred VAT from the period March to June of 2020 this year. There is an option there to defer to March 2022 if you opt in and make smaller payments over a longer period of time to help with your cash flows. So I'm hoping that's sort of given you a sense of what you can do that's internal to the business, what management can perhaps be looking at to unlock some cash within the operations of the business, and hopefully that's given you some tangible ideas there of things to look at and to be aware of as you're managing that going forward.
Wow, thanks, Laura. That's absolutely a tour de force of the kind of that wheel gives us a real insight in the 8 areas that you can address within the business. We often see in the business support world, you often find that businesses present to you all the time looking for finance when often there's all sorts of resources within the company that haven't been unlocked, and it's critical at these times that businesses use the most cost-effective option. And as you said at the introduction to your piece there, Laura, the cheapest money and the most available money is the money that you're sitting on, that you've generated yourselves already. So absolutely sage advice. Am I right in thinking we'll be able to have a copy of those slides? Would that be okay, Laura, that we could share with all the participants? That would be great. I think that wheel you produced there is a really great checklist, and it's clear to me why you've got the plaudits that you have for the service that you've offered. We've certainly massively valued the business resilience support you've provided to about 100 or so businesses now over the course of the last six months, and we're hoping to be able to continue that business resilience service in the weeks and months ahead. So if anyone's interested in understanding more of what BDO can do, BDO are not the only supplier. I think I've got to say that there's lots of providers out there that can provide this sort of sage advice. But You heard it from the horse's mouth there. That's an absolutely brilliant introduction to this issue for us. So thank you very much for that, Laura. And you kept to time, which is equally impressive. So thanks very much. We'll now move on to Philip King. Philip and I met about a month or so ago in the Metro Mayor's office, virtually with the Metro Mayor, to talk about. Philip was keen to see what he could do to support our city region. I know, Philip, you go all over the country offering the support of your small business commission. And we're delighted that you agreed and able to make some time available for us today to share what your organisation's doing and what businesses can do to help unlock finance through you. So over to you, Philip. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark, and good morning to everybody. What a great presentation by Laura from BDO. The cheapest cash is that within your business already. Cash is absolutely king at the moment and will be for the months ahead, and managing the cash cycle and managing the way you do business to ensure that cash is available to you is absolutely vital. And of course, the Small Business Commissioner was set up to address and resolve payment disputes between big and small businesses and to tackle unfavourable payment practice. And if you wanted to encapsulate this in one term, it would be that the Small Business Commissioner helps you free the cash that's already sitting within your business, or perhaps should be sitting within your business, but isn't yet. If Karen could put my first slide up, that would be great, please. I've only got two, so there's no PowerPoint overload this morning. The Small Business Commissioner has three roles. The first is giving information and advice. And by the way, that's a free service, so we don't make any charge for any of the services we provide. But we give advice and information to small businesses who want to help in terms of invoicing, setting up contracts, how to get paid, how to avoid not getting paid. On our website, we have a late payment interest calculator, which they can use to identify and calculate how much interest they're owed for late payments from their customers, so that they can charge that and recoup some of the money they've lost by not being paid. Where we can't help directly, and we're restricted by legislation on what we can and can't do, but where we can't help directly, then we will signpost to existing support and other dispute resolution services that exist and with which we have good relationships. And very often, where an inquiry comes into us which is outside our remit, we will refer it to organisations like Liverpool Growth Company and so on, where they can help and support the business concerned. The second activity we undertake is to resolve disputes between businesses. So it's not unusual for a business to ring us and say, our customer won't pay us. We talk to the customer and the customer says, well, we shouldn't pay because. Where that happens, my team of caseworkers will get involved, will intervene, and will try and get the parties to come to an agreement so that payment can be released. Where it's simply a case that the business isn't paying and should be, my team again will pick up the phone and talk to the large customer and say, come on, it's time you put money into the account of your small supplier. It's an important element. We've raised something like £7.5 million so far since we were set up in 2017, and we've raised almost £690,000 and growing by the day since lockdown started back in March. Where we identify poor payment practice, I have the power to issue a report publicly, setting out what I found, making recommendations on how businesses should improve their payment practice. And that's a useful exercise in getting businesses to look within themselves at what they're getting wrong. And very often it's a case of their processes that are letting them down rather than necessarily a willful determination that they won't pay. Where we issue a report, and I've issued two since I've been in post at the beginning of the year, we will talk to the businesses, work with them, work through an action plan to improve their payment practice, and then I follow up with them after 3 months and 6 months to make sure that the recommendations we put in place have been implemented, and indeed that the supplier is being treated better than they were before. And we try wherever we can to talk to the suppliers involved to make sure that they're more comfortable than they were previously. You could ask, why do we get any success in collecting money that small businesses can't do for themselves? I guess the reality is that a call from the Small Business Commissioner carries a little bit more weight than a call from a small events caterer in Runcorn, for example. So we have I guess the power to have a bit more weight and gravitas, and therefore add to what the small business is doing. And let me say that we also have an awful lot of success indirectly, which isn't included in the numbers I just quoted, because very often, having talked to a small business, they don't want us to intervene, but they use our name in their discussions with their customer and find that that has a powerful effect on what they're trying to achieve, which is getting money out of their customer. The third element, which is slightly less tangible in conceptual terms, is driving change in payment culture. I said that our remit under legislation is restricted. There are some things that I can't do. There are some areas where I can't intervene formally, but I can intervene informally. So throughout COVID, where I've seen large businesses doing good things to support their supply chain, I've been writing out to the chief execs, thanking them on behalf of the small business community for what they're doing. Where I've had intelligence that says that they're not treating their small suppliers as I'd like them to, I've also written to the chief execs and the chief financial officers and asked to have informally a conversation to chat about their position. I've had between 30 and 40 of those conversations over the last few months, and they've been really productive. I can't share the names with you because they are confidential conversations, but there'll be names that you would recognise from the high street and from the financial press. Very often, though, in those conversations, I've found that before I've even had the conversation but have set it up, then things have happened within the business. But my task and my objective in those conversations is get the large business to understand the impact they have on their smallest suppliers, often who are one-man bands, freelancers and consultants and so on. And I try and get them to understand that the impact of late payment for them is a few rows on a spreadsheet and a few pounds in the bank. For the smallest business, it may be the difference between putting food on the table or not putting food on the table. And the impact on a small business of not being paid isn't just financial, it's also their well-being. I've talked to thousands of small businesses on webinars and forums and so on through lockdown, and I've heard some harrowing stories of business owners that have gone through sleep deprivation, eating disorders, relationship breakdowns, mood swings, and a whole load of other issues affecting their mental health and well-being. And it's really important that large business understands the impact that it can have, both positive and negative, when it chooses to do the right thing. And if I may, I'll share one brief anecdote, which I think encapsulates this really well. When lockdown started, Pete Redfern, who is the chief exec of Taylor Wimpey, recognised that his smallest single one-man contractors would have some real problems. So he got his divisional managers and directors to call all those small suppliers to reassure them that there would be no delay to payments going to them. And then he went a step further and he said he would pay those small suppliers early, 3 months money in advance for work they were yet to do, so that when they were ready to reopen sites, those businesses were still around and would be able to return to site and carry on the building work that was required. And then he went a step further still, and he opened up his intranet employee assistance programs that exist for his own employees to those small contractors so they could seek help in all sorts of areas that would normally only be available to Taylor Wimpey employees. And I share that story, and there are many similar stories I could share, but I share that because for me, we see the impact of late payment of invoices, but invoices being paid late is an articulation of the relationship that exists between buyers and suppliers. And where suppliers are seen as partners to the business, those businesses work together, and they work in a spirit of collaboration rather than confrontation. And it's no surprise that those businesses that treat their suppliers well and therefore pay them well also tend to treat their employees well too. So late payment of invoices for me is as much corporate social responsibility as is ensuring we cut down less trees or we use less energy. It's around the way in which relationships are built. And of course, business takes place between people, and that's really important. The second area of changing culture is that the Office of the Small Business Commissioner now hosts and administers the Prompt Payment Code, which was set up in 2008 by Peter Mandelson when he was Business Secretary. And the Prompt Payment Code allows businesses to sign up, businesses of all sizes to sign up and commit to pay their suppliers on time, to make sure that they communicate if there's a problem with an invoice, and to make sure businesses know what they need to do to get paid, and to encourage their supply chain to do the same thing. There are about 2,700 signatories to the Prompt Payment Code. We've had 300 plus, almost 400 businesses sign up since March. And those businesses set themselves out to do the right thing. Over time, we've suspended businesses from the code when they haven't complied with the requirements. And we've just completed a survey looking at and consulting on how the code can be revisited, reformed and reviewed, and that the new reformed code will be launched later this year. And finally, in terms of culture, we work very hard on education. So we work with universities and growth hubs around the country to help educate big businesses on how they should behave and small businesses on what they should be doing to make sure they get paid. And Laura had some great tips on that in her presentation earlier this morning. Getting the basics right is really important, and I could talk about that for a long time if I had the time to do so. We work with business rep organisations, with trade bodies and so on, because we need to raise awareness of what we do with small businesses, and we need to raise awareness of what big businesses need to do to support the supply chain and make it sustainable, and what small businesses need to do to ensure that they get paid. But if Carolyn can move to my final slide, please. Where businesses are struggling to get paid, if they've chased their customer 2 or 3 times and haven't been paid, then please reach out to my office. Our contact details are there. We're here to help. We have a team of caseworkers who will take on each individual case individually. A single person will look after it. If we can't help, we'll send you somewhere where you can get help. Where we can, we will endeavour to get money for you, and we're a free service, and we are available and willing to help at any time.
Thanks so much, Philip. That's a really outstanding piece of guidance. Look, running a small business, as many of those on this call will know, is difficult at the best of times. And at these particularly trying times, it can be an incredibly lonely place, and there's often you feel powerless and frustrated. Certainly, if your key customers are large companies who you're a minnow to. So I suspect you've got a superhero outfit in the wardrobe there behind you for you and your team. I think it's a brilliant service, and I think it's too little known and understood. That's why after we chatted, Philip, I was so keen that we made sure our businesses were aware of what your team can do, because once you've tried 2 or 3 times to get a large business to act fairly with you and not got anywhere, I guess a lot of businesses either give up or they're too busy with other things to have a team available to them to get those businesses to do the right thing, as you said in that presentation, could be an absolute lifeline, obviously depending on the value of that invoice. But we all know that a lot of small businesses often just have a handful of large customers, and where they do, you're very reliant on those large customers acting fairly and with the contract terms that they've agreed. So it's a brilliant service. Really appreciate you providing it and making it available to our businesses. We'll certainly be promoting it through all of our channels so that the businesses do feel that they've somewhere to go if they're not getting joy in doing things in the way that perhaps Laura has suggested in her first presentation there. So thank you very much for that. We've got, let me just see, I've got one question in there. I've just got a hi in the Q&A. Have we got any other questions? Okay. Now, at the moment, we've got no questions and no chat. So in the interests of time, we will provide an opportunity for any questions you might have for any of the speakers at the end of the session before we wrap up. I am going to try and wrap up just after quarter past, maybe 20 past 11 or so. So if you have any questions, please fire them across. With that, I'll now hand over to Stephen Johnson. As I said in the intro, the name Bibby is synonymous with Liverpool City Region. You know, as a group, they've a huge presence here in the City Region. They're a global business now in many areas of business, and we're delighted that we have Bibby Financial Services headquartered here in the City Region, and I'm delighted that Stephen's able to join us in a critical part of the business financial support that's available. So over to you, Stephen.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mark, for the invite. It's really appreciated. And Philip and Laura, they were fantastic presentations. I hope we can live up to that and perhaps dovetail in where Bibby can support what you guys are quite rightly saying. And Philip, Sarah, who's my colleague joining me on the call to talk about trade finance, might give you a couple of examples where some of the big operators are pushing out debtor days and causing the smaller businesses an issue. So maybe there's something that you can take up for those guys as well. Mark, I'm not too sure where you pull that photo out from either. The hair's obviously changed quite a bit in colour. So I'm going to now, guys, just share screens with you, and we'll canter through our little presentation. Okay, I'm hoping you can all see that and hear it as well, because there is some audio as well to stop it being too boring with my voice. So I won't read this first slide out. I think the important point for me to call out from this slide is that Bibby can support businesses in these tough times. We've done it before in the banking crisis of the 2008 and 2009, and we've stood by small businesses, and that's what we intend to do throughout this tough period as well. The next one, as Mark said, and I feel like half of my presentation has been stolen by the other presenters. Our head office is in Liverpool. We have centralised our operations in 8 other offices around the country, but we are a family-run business. We've been in Liverpool for over 200 years, and our sales and relationship team are all home-based. Little did we know that the majority of the UK would be home-based to a fashion, but it's working quite well for us. We're transacting and working remotely, and I guess the biggest issue for us is making sure that our colleagues are keeping their heads motivated and well-being while you're stuck at home, because not going into offices is often a tougher environment. Our funding support, we'll go into talk about some of the areas that are highlighted on the slides. One area that we probably won't go into in any great detail is asset finance. Just to put the picture on that, our asset finance for us is machinery, trucks, CCTVs. It can even be restaurants, chairs and tables, and ovens that we'll finance. What we're writing a lot of at the moment is a refinance to help people sweat the assets and basically put cash into the business. So we class those assets as hard and soft assets. So if you want more detail on that, I can pick up after this call. And in terms of customer service, we're pretty proud of 2 things in Bibby. Well, 2 things that I'm very proud of. One is our Trustpilot scores, which are pretty good. And the second one is that we're in the top 100 best companies to work for. And we have been for the last 8 years. So we're pretty proud of that fact. It's a good place to work. I've included this slide in because this kind of, for me, what's happening at the moment is probably overshadowing Brexit and the challenges that are afoot. Bibby provides facilities for customers in the UK that are trading around the world, selling goods, and indeed, as Sarah will highlight, bringing goods in as well. But we do have operations in Europe. We've recently sold America. A while back, we sold Australia as well. So we've consolidated into Europe, and that's proving good for us because we've tied up very closely with our colleagues, and we're helping support businesses that perhaps want to open up in Ireland with a view of what's happening in Brexit. And similarly, only yesterday, we helped a prospect that's having difficulty in getting an understanding with the payment terms in Belgium. We engaged our colleagues over in Belgium to help understand that language barrier. So we've got a fairly flat structure that we can pick the phone up to colleagues in these countries, so it works pretty good. Okay, so we'll go through trade and invoice finance, and just to give you a heads up, I'll probably cement what the other presentations have been about. I'll run VT hopefully, and if you can't hear, I'm hoping that somebody will flag to me and I'll see what I can do.
Trade finance, funding and support to help you buy goods within the UK and overseas. Jamie runs a successful fashion wholesale business in the UK. He wants to fulfill a new order and import the goods from overseas, but he needs to finance it. He needs to bridge the cash flow gap between paying his overseas suppliers and waiting for his customers to pay for their orders. Jamie also wants to manage the effect currency fluctuations could have on his profits. He also needs help with the complexities that come with buying goods overseas. That's why Jamie contacted Sarah at Bibby Financial Services. Sarah explained how trade finance could help Jamie's business to buy more goods and help negotiate discounts with his suppliers. One way Jamie could pay his suppliers is with a deposit or full prepayment, even before his goods are shipped. By making prompt payment for goods, Jamie could benefit from any supplier discounts. Another option could be to pay his suppliers once the goods are shipped with a letter of credit or supplier undertaking. Adding an integrated effects service would also help protect Jamie's profits from the uncertainty of currency exchange rates. Here's how it works. Place an order with your supplier, either in the UK or overseas, and we make a prepayment or deposit payment on your behalf. Alternatively, you can place an order with your supplier and we make a guarantee of future payment once the goods are shipped. We can provide a funding facility up to £10 million on receipt of the agreed documentation, making payment to the supplier in a currency of their choice. We also pay your duty, VAT and freight on the same day your goods arrive, so there are no delays. When the goods are delivered, you repay us once they are sold or from an invoice finance facility that we can arrange. You can also cover yourself against non-payment of invoices with bad debt protection, protecting up to 90% of your bad debts. This also includes credit checks on new clients. Trade finance can help you pay your suppliers and manage your cash flow more effectively so you can buy the goods you need. We can do this for both pre-sold orders and speculative sales. If you think trade finance could help your business, then talk to us today.
Okay, guys, I'd like to welcome Sarah to my little presentation. And Sarah, you'll kind of go through a couple of stories, really, of where we've been seeing some challenges in the marketplace and how you're helping to facilitate some clients buying goods from overseas and indeed in the UK as well.
Yeah, thank you. Morning, everybody. Yeah, so I guess a couple of challenges that we've seen recently with some new clients that we've been speaking to is clients that have been dealing with actually TK Maxx in the market. Don't even unhear deals with TK Maxx, but they've actually recently wrote to all their customers and pushed their payment terms out to 90 days, which is obviously having quite an impact on cash flow for these businesses. These businesses in particular need to kind of buy goods up front or get goods manufactured from the likes of China or Bangladesh. So often money can be out the door from when they're placing the order for 60 days until goods come into the UK. And then obviously they've got another 90 days on top of that when they're raising their invoice. So even just there, you've got 150 days payment gap there, and kind of 6 months where they can be out of pocket. So that's really where our trade finance and invoice finance can help alleviate those cash pressures. So one recent company that we actually onboarded recently is a company that designed their own brand of small electrical kitchen appliances. And after successful marketing, they secured a large contract with a UK distributor. So they had obviously the confirmed order in hand, but now had the challenge of getting these goods manufactured from their suppliers in China. So they therefore approached Bibby to see if we could help with the trade finance to help support paying the deposits that these suppliers are after. And these were 30% deposits to start the manufacturing process. So with our trade finance support, we were able to make those deposit payments to the supplier to get the goods manufactured, and then make the balancing payments once the goods were being shipped from China. Goods then come into the UK, they raise the invoice, we use the availability from that invoice to repay the trade money and liquidate the transaction, and obviously fund it on the invoice finance until their customer is going to pay in 30 days time. So it's just a really good way to kind of bridge that cash flow gap. And also with that particular client, we were also able to put an FX line in place for them so that they could forward buy currency to protect them from potential exchange fluctuations and save on more costs. So I think that's some really good examples of where the trade and invoice finance can help our clients.
Yeah, fabulous. Thanks, Sarah. I think for me, it is an exciting product because we are seeing, I don't know if you guys take the view, but if you do go into some stores, that they do look a little bit lacking of stock. And when we get the call out from prospects at the moment saying, can you help us? That's what we want to do really in terms of joining up that payment terms that have been pushed out, and suppliers that really don't really want to let goods leave the premises now without payment, because the world has changed. So what Sarah does is fantastic in joining up all the dots. And you made it sound easy, Sarah, but it's really not. There's a lot of complexity around understanding Incoterms, the terms and conditions of who we're selling to, because sometimes and often the goods are then being pushed out overseas. So we have to understand the nature of terms in those countries. And then you've got the currency that obviously Sarah mentioned that add to all this complexity. So thank you very much for that, Sarah. Do you want to add anything else, Sarah?
Yeah,
Sorry.
one thing I just note as well is obviously with the trade finance, the key takeaway is it doesn't have to be an overseas supplier. Where you've got UK suppliers that aren't offering credit terms, we can also support in those scenarios. And again, customers don't need to be in the UK. We do fund 100% export as well under the invoice finance. So there are things also to kind of bear in mind.
Yeah, fabulous. Right, guys, we'll run another little VT if it works. And this is just a little case study that I hope again just paints the picture, and dovetailing perhaps with the two presentations earlier on, how you can get support into your clients.
I'm Rob Pattenden and I'm the Managing Director of Tech Professionals. Primarily we work with companies that do offshore renewables, so like wind farms, that kind of thing, and also subsea cable lay for the communications sector. So we're sending guys out to all sorts of various locations around the world. We've got projects in like remote islands in Indonesia, the Caribbean, places like that, and then nearer to home we've got people working on really big offshore wind farm projects in the North Sea. Like basically all recruitment businesses, cash flow is front and center in terms of the kind of challenges that we have to face. The way it works is we pay our contractors on a monthly basis, but often our clients won't pay us for, say, 60 days or even more sometimes. So we've got to look at something that bridges that gap. So for the previous 3 years, we were working with another invoice financing company, and they were fine. But we've actually seen some serious growth in the last few years, actually growing 100% every year for the last 3 years. And we needed to work with a company that had the size to be able to handle what we were looking for, but also that desire to come on the journey of growth with us. So we started looking into the market. We spoke to a few different companies, and we even spoke to our bank. And in the end, we settled on Bibby Financial Services. They were a company that just had that size and had that scalability that we were looking for. We've got a dedicated team at Bibby. We've got a client manager, a team leader, and a credit controller. In the 3 months that we've been working with Bibby since we came on board, we've actually had 3 of our busiest ever months. We've taken on 3 new clients, including 2 sterling clients in the UK and a dollar client in Singapore. So it's been extremely busy, and we couldn't have done any of that without the support we're getting from Bibby. Cash flow, which has obviously always been a big concern for us, has been put into ever sharper focus with what's happened with COVID, and particularly for us because our clients are actually based all over the world, and that has been a real concern for us. But Bibby have been there to support us all the way through. So our plan is to continue to develop the business along these lines of demand and keep sending more and more offshore technical and engineering personnel out to work. In order to do this, we need to maintain the funding that Bibby gives us, because that funding really is the engine of our business.
Okay, guys, thank you very much for listening to us. I hope I haven't overrun. Mark, over to you, unless there's any questions.
Brilliant, Stephen. No, spot on timing. Couldn't be almost to the second, I think, Stephen. You must have rehearsed that. That's really good, and great to see some real life examples there of business. It really does bring to life the impact that you can have on a business. Really welcome any questions folks have. I think often the sort of services you provide, perhaps businesses think, oh, that's not for me. It's only for the big players and what have you. But your services will really reach down to smaller businesses.
Yeah, we do. We help new starts. We've got a specific product that's fairly easy to understand, because as you get bigger deals, they can become a little bit overcomplicated. So we've got a small product we call Forward Finance. It's specifically for businesses under 300,000. It's on a rolling 30 days contract. So people have given us a set of invoices, and sadly, that's the last we've seen of them. And then other businesses have absolutely grown, and we've had to reschedule the type of agreement they've got and give them more access to cash. So yeah, there's we support new starts right the way up.
Okay, look, in the interest of time, we'll crack on. But that was excellent. Again, you've kept you've done Bibby proud, and you've kept the standards really high, Stephen, Sarah. Thank you both very much for that. We may come back to you if we've any questions and any time before we finish. But listen, fourth and final of our presentations today is from Mark Borzomato. Mark and I go a few years back. We've both been around the city region for 20 odd years or so, and I think many of you will know MSIF and the great support you've been to small businesses through debt and equity finance. But I know, Mark, you wanted to just talk through some of the things that are available to businesses and a pyramid of support for businesses, and on what process business can go through in trying to analyse and determine what's the best route to finance. So, Mark, over to you.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks to Growth Platform for putting on the event. Thanks to everyone for joining. I hope we're all keeping safe. And thanks for the previous presenters as well, who probably stole some of my detail, really. But a brief introduction. My name's Mark Borzomato. I'm the Chief Executive of Merseyside Special Investment Fund. We are a regional investor supporting Liverpool City region based SMEs, with a variety of debt and equity investment products. Personally, I've been involved in the investment side now for about 15 years, and prior to that I was an advisor. I've also spent time in industry, trying to secure finance, and also conducted my own MBO. So Mark put the pressure on me of a reasonably broad heading to discuss the support that may be able to help businesses access commercial and other debt and equity finance. Bit of a tough and broad subject to cover in 15 minutes, so I'm afraid only a single slide from me. There'll be no death by PowerPoint. I suppose one of the things that I is often quoted to me, and I'm aware of, and it does predate the pandemic, is businesses looking for growth funding, where do they turn? And the statistic that used to scare me was, of all the businesses looking for growth funding, a third expect the answer to be no, and therefore don't speak to anyone. A third don't know who to speak to, and only a third of them look to therefore pursue looking for growth finance. I think what I'd like to talk through therefore is just reinforce some of the various previous speakers' comments and build it into an element of it that I'm referring to on the slide as a funding pyramid. And I think on the actual pyramid, Laura already commented earlier, most businesses will have cash in the business already. It could potentially be locked up. It could need some change in approach to release that cash availability, but it is yours to control. It comes at no cost and is likely the simplest form of finance that you've got in the business. That doesn't mean the process of unlocking it is simple, but it means that it's in your gift. And I think moving that's kind of the base of the pyramid that I've put there, because it is available to all. So I think the first thing to understand is quite how your investor, how your funder would potentially get the return on their investment, and what is the difference between the debt and equity offerings. So the debt offerings in there typically are taking their returns by repayment and interest. They would generally look for security in a business to be able to take security over various assets in the business, and would tend to be serviced out of the cash generation of the business. So the ability to generate cash would therefore be a reasonably likely requirement for a debt lend. Equity elements, on the other hand, tend to take a stake in the business, take an actual shareholding in the business, and their ultimate gain would then come from the sale of shares in the future. The likelihood, therefore, is they're looking for an increase in value of the business rather than looking at the short-term cash generation of the business. Likely to be less focused on servicing, and likely to be more projection-led. They are keen to see a business which is looking to grow, which has an ability to increase the value of the company. It tends to be higher risk. It would be unlikely, given that they are looking to support business growth, there may be limited security or limited short-term cash flow, such that it would be higher risk. And as a result of that, they do tend to look for greater return, as I've put on the slide there. The cost of the money is higher, but it's looking to understand the growth profile of the business. As a result of that, there are fewer equity investments, and one of the reasons why it's a pyramid, it's not that one is better than the other, but it's more that there are generally fewer equity investments as they look for those growth businesses. And the diligence that an equity investor would look to do, the support to make an investment decision would likely be more thorough. It would be based on diligence around the commercial opportunity for a business. Can a business grow? Is the management team capable of delivering that growth? Is it in a market where that growth is possible? And so the growth profile of the investee businesses is different. Businesses which can support debt, it may not be that equity is the right vehicle for them. It generally, therefore, tends to be a tougher investment process with an increased degree of diligence than typical debt lends. And I think the other element of it is that there is greater involvement and support potentially from an equity investor. They are very much focused on supporting the business growth. Equity comes in a few different guises that we've all become a little bit more familiar with lately. Equity investment may come from crowdfunding sources. It may come from angel investment sources, or it may come from institutional investments such as MSIF. And I think one of the observations I would make on that is that crowdfunding is usually a cheaper form of equity. They would require a smaller stake in the business than typical institutional investors may look for. So there may be a cost benefit in there, but we don't normally tend to be less involved than an angel or institutional investor who are looking to support businesses to make sure they capitalize on their fundraising opportunity, their growth opportunities moving forward. I think the overall element of this, though, is there are just different funding avenues available for different stages of business. It will depend on the current cash generation of the business, the growth potential of the business, and the owner's appetite of what they ultimately want to do with the business moving forward and where they want to take it. I think the really important thing is to speak to advisors and funders and understand what options are right for each individual business. I think it's important in the current climate to also highlight funding is still available. There are still equity investments available. There is still the debt market offering at the moment. And it is important that businesses are aware of who they can actually approach and consider the overall options that are available to them. Speaking to advisors, it'd be certainly a positive just to understand the differences of the various products. I have to apologise, Mark, because I've ended up in a very unusual position now to do my presentation from the Wi-Fi concept. Ultimately, it's about what an individual business is looking for. And you'll have to forgive me, Mark, I am struggling with the Wi-Fi, I'm afraid. So can I hand back to you?
Yeah, of course you can. Thanks for soldiering on there. I'm sure we got the main thrust of that. We only lost you for a minute or two, Mark. And I know you very sort of generously didn't use this as a to just plug MSIF, because I know you're very conscious of the fact that MSIF is there to support the whole of the ecosystem of all funding providers, from banks and Northern Powerhouse investment funds and others, and weren't just looking to push MSIF. However, I must say that for those folks, many of you will know MSIF's role, but it's been going for 25 years now, and in that time it has lent lent or provided finance through equity to well over 2,500 businesses, and put about almost £200 million into the city region's economy to support those businesses. So a great effort by you and previous colleagues in doing that. I know alongside lots of others, but the whole point of MSIF is kind of filling that gap, isn't it, where perhaps where commercial finance doesn't quite take you. So, and the point you made, Mark, about your use of advisors, absolutely. The whole point of having an effective business ecosystem is not for the public sector to step in with competing products. It's to try and fill gaps and to join that ecosystem together. And the most important thing is to use your professional advisors and guidance that's out there. But I know another thing that MSIF has done, which we very much have supported and are working closely with, is establishing a finance hub. And that finance hub has, in the last couple of years, handled over 1,000 inquiries from local businesses about what access to finance, what sort of, taking businesses through what you described there, Mark, what's most appropriate for their business, but also looking at the, this issue of investment readiness within businesses and making sure that a business is genuinely ready for that investment. And often there's work to be done within a business. And that's where we come in. Organisations like ours are there to support businesses to get investment ready, working with all of the commercial providers, particularly for micro businesses where perhaps you don't have retained expertise like a BDO or similar out there in the marketplace. So look, folks, we're coming up to 11:15. We said we'd look to finish around that time. We've had no specific questions. You obviously either had all of your questions answered, or you're too polite and shy to ask any questions. I wonder if I could invite any of our speakers just to say perhaps a final closing. Is there one piece of advice that you may offer to businesses on this call that what would you, if I go to you first, Philip, you've worked with businesses around the country. One closing comment from each of you would be great, and then we'll close off for the day.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, my advice would be communicate. I think Laura mentioned this about the fact that businesses are talking to each other more through these times. I was interested in the Bibby presentation, particularly the comments around TK Maxx, because I've talked to TK Maxx through the COVID-19 crisis, and I do know that there are occasions when they will listen and shift their position where they need to. So I'd love to be put in touch with the supplier that's got a real problem there, because we might be able to help. But finally, for me, two things. One is, I didn't say in my presentation that we will look at debts of any size. During COVID, we've collected one debt of £524 and one of £91,000 and lots in between. So size isn't important, and however small it is to a micro business, it's really important, and we want to know about it.
Great, thanks, Philip. Laura, can I come to you? Any sort of single nugget of advice?
I think for me, it's the advice, I guess, that I started out with. Your working capital is free finance for the business, and it is the responsibility of everybody in your business. So do be looking very practically at where all the members of your team, all your departments can have a real impact there, and you're not entering into contracts or decisions that will ultimately affect your cash position later on. I guess the other thing, just to reiterate what Philip said, is communicate, ask for help. There's a lot of very proactive services providers, both in the private and the public sector in Liverpool, there to help. So don't struggle through, do reach out for help.
Thanks, Laura. Mark, I'm going to come to you with a question from Brian Noon that's in the chat. I don't know if you can see it. I'll go to Stephen first while you're preparing an answer to Brian's question. Yeah, Stephen,
I'm on. Am I on? Yeah, thanks again for the invite, Mark. Very quickly, it's a ditto to what both the other presenters have said. Don't be afraid to ask. There are opportunities out there as well. So, and there are people that are available to explore those opportunities, particularly in trading abroad, and we can dovetail in with that support package on the finance to help you do that as well. So, you know, as we're getting out of the situation we're in, let's not forget that we're kind of in a bit of a village, so there's lots of opportunities to go out with the local marketplace.
Yeah, no, completely agreed. And we do listen. We get loads of businesses coming to us, but what's the most frustrating thing is that there's thousands more that haven't and don't. And there's a huge amount of support out there. Okay, final point with you, Mark. A question from Brian Noon. Where MSIF takes an equity investment, how would the company enable it to typically realise its investments? And would the original owners buy out with debt? Do other funds come in? Quite a lot to digest there in 2 minutes. If you can just a top of the head response, and maybe perhaps connect outside of this session with Brian directly.
Yeah, more than happy to do that, Mark. My first piece of advice that I was going to give is don't use our boardroom for Wi-Fi signal when presenting to live audiences. I apologise to everyone for that again. In answer to Brian's question, it differs. There isn't one prescribed answer. And as long as we are in discussions with management from the outset, we can shape a product to ultimately understand what the objective of the management team is in the future. We will sell at the same time as management and sell our equity alongside management, and sell to another trade buyer or another institutional buyer. Sometimes management want to stay longer with the business, and they may choose to refinance the equity investment and to effectively buy it out and carry on again themselves. It really is. There are different structures that equity investment can come up with. As long as everyone's open with it at the outset, I think there are various outcomes that can be accommodated in structures which will deliver everyone's objectives, really. And then, if I can, Mark, just my little piece of advice. We've heard from a number of speakers today. I don't see a lot of the investment as being exclusive from each other. I don't think it's a case of maximising the cash on your balance sheet and not speaking to the debt provider or not thinking about equity. They are complementary forms of finance typically, and I would encourage people to consider, not which one is right for them, but potentially look at all and understand, make sure that there's a full understanding there before moving forward. Because, just as an example, MSIF, we've got a significant number of investments where Bibby are already an invoice discounter in that business. Conscious that Bibby were speaking earlier, we work alongside the banks and are supplemental to them, so that there is a blend in there and a package in there that sometimes can work just as much as an individual avenue of it. Okay, Mark.
Great, thanks, Mark, for that. Look, folks, with that, I know time is precious, and we're keen to finish by past at the latest. So a big thank you to all of our presenters, to Laura, who kicked us off, to Philip, who's joined us from down south, covering the whole of the UK and being with us especially today. Thank you for that. To Stephen and Sarah from Bibby, thanks for your insight and guidance, and to Mark from MSIF. It's been a real pleasure to have all of you presenting. We've got some fantastic material to put online. We will look to share presentations, we'll share contact details. Carolyn and the team, a big thank you to you for steering us all through this and setting everything up. Through Carolyn, we will get everything we can out to you to share all of that information. If you've any questions that you haven't had an answer to, or anything that comes to you as a result of this, as you know, I think the overriding message from everyone was communicate. Don't be afraid to ask. We're all of us here. Our lifeblood in terms of our customers is you coming to us with a question, a problem, a challenge, and it's our job to find a solution to it. So don't hold back on those things. That's what we're here to do. We're all part of a joined up ecosystem, so it doesn't matter who you come to, you ask a question, the aim is it will go to the right place and you'll get an answer to it. So with that, thanks everybody for joining us. I hope that you're able to, keep your business in decent shape over the coming weeks and months. I know it's a very difficult time for everybody. If there's anything any of us can do, please don't hesitate to ask. With that, I'll say thank you and cheerio, and hopefully see you all soon. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.